Yesterday I did a rather long video about how we can change the chemicals within to rebalance the release of serotonin, which is your happiness hormone. It keeps you on an even keel, and to help to put a damper on the release of cortisol, the stress hormone. So today, the next step in moving on in creating sort of stress prevention strategies is really to look at where you are now and where you want to be, because we often fall into being the person that we just happen to be rather than thinking about what our behaviours and how we actually want to be. And often when we look back at ourselves, we sort of make decisions that are reactive and we kind of think, oh, I could have done that better. An example of this would be when I was working in corporate, very stressed, trying to juggle everything, family, travelling, work, all the rest of it. I became what I would term as a no mum. So every time my kids asked me a question, whether it was just something simple like going to the playground, I just said no, because I simply didn't have the capacity to kind of make any really proactive decisions on it. And my immediate default was negative. And when I look back now, I think, actually I could have made nicer decisions. I could have been nicer to be around. So it's really about making sure that you live the life you want, that you are the person you want to be rather than just the person you are. So the first step in this is really assessing where you are now, and we use something called scaling. So if you think of a scale between 0 and 10, with 0 being the worst and 10 being the best you've ever felt, if you can get an idea of what number you are on that scale when you were in the past over your whole lifetime at the worst, then get the number that you feel you were at your very best. So they give you your benchmarks, your worst, how you felt at your worst and how you felt at your best. Now, using that scale, think about where you are now on that scale, whether you're further, closer to your worst, closer to your best, or somewhere in the middle. And that kind of just gives you an idea of where you are, where you've been, and where you could get to. Now, when we think about trying to make changes, I want you to think about it as a long-term goal. It's not something that happens overnight. So if you imagine that you're standing at the base of Everest. Now, no one climbs from the bottom of Everest right to the top in one big bound. They don't do it in one go. They take time over it. They get to base camp 1, then they consolidate, they rest, they gather themselves, then they get to base camp number 2 and number 3 and so on. Now, if you think of making any changes in your life in the same way, so rather than trying to get from where you are now to where you want to be to make a massive change in one go, just think about putting small changes in place. And it really helps you to embed those changes, and then you can move on to the next one. Now, the point of this is that we need time to consolidate those changes. We need time to embed them in. And it also gives us time to think about the route that we're going to go. Sometimes you might go in a straight route up to the top. It might be quite not easy, but a straightforward path that you have. Other times it might be that you meander around a bit. You might even slip back a bit, but you know that when you've got to a base camp that you're not going to slip past that. You'll always be caught at that, and then you can move on again. So what I'd like you to do is think about what small step you could take to move you up slightly on that scale. So for instance, if you've scored yourself at this moment in time at a 5, what would you notice that would be different that could move you up to the next point, or even the next half a point? Now, it can be simple things. It can be tidying your desk. It can be waking up 5 minutes earlier so you're not quite so stressed. It can be putting in exercise into your life. Whatever it is, just think about what would make a difference in your life, a small difference, what would clear a little bit of space in your mind. And when you've got that first point, you can start to action it. And it has to be something you can do, and it has to be something that is actionable. If you can go away and do that, the next step would then be to think of the next small actionable step. And you're incrementally making changes that are easy to embed, that your brain accepts, it doesn't fight against, and before you know it, over a very small amount of time, you might find yourself becoming more proactive in your decision making, calmer, moving towards the person you want to be rather than being the person that you just happen to be. One thing I want you also to consider is that we practice to be the person that we are. So if you practice being, for me, that negative, always saying no, well, that's a person I'll always be, because it becomes easier and easier and easier to do those things. If you have a goal in mind, if you can start to step into those shoes, start to live in that life, start to practice to be the person you want to be, then it's easier to get there. You're already making the changes. So today's actionable point is really to think about your scaling, where you've been at your worst, where you've been at your best, where you are now. And then to think of something small, achievable, actionable that you can do in the immediate future. It doesn't have to be right this minute, but certainly within the next 24 hours or so, that will start to make a difference. Because when we start making small differences, when we start achieving small things, it becomes easier to achieve the next thing. It kind of has a cumulative effect. So that's your task for today, is to find that small actionable step that you can take that will start making you go towards the person that you want to be.